I just got back from Santa Fe, so I'm still exhausted.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't get back until like a couple nights ago.
Wow.
Yep. We did all of Indian Market, which you haven't seen, right? We were talking about that, right? You haven't gone to it, right? Yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
it's hyper stimulating for somebody like yourself or and me. So
Yeah.
it's just all kind of art, movement everywhere, people everywhere, sounds everywhere, smells everywhere, you know, I mean, different cultures everywhere. And
Yeah.
so it's like a bouncing energy. Uh,
Yeah. Completely immersive experience, right?
it really is. So
Yeah.
I love those things, but at the same time, they just completely, utterly drain me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Being in large crowds like that with so much activity and so much input from all your senses, it just by the end you're going, oh, give me a nice field to lay down in.
Yes, that was exactly how I felt. And I was doing interviews too, cold call interviews,
Oh my
which
gosh.
it's fun, but I mean it's also stressful. So anyway. All right, enough of
Yeah, because you're
me. Let's
learning, you're learning the whole time, right? You're
yeah,
getting to meet new people and you're learning
yeah,
about them and their experiences, and
yep. That's exactly right. No,
that's
it's
cool.
and you want to be very present.
Oh
And that
yeah.
and that's always can be challenging as well.
Yeah, especially if you have more lined up, right? You want to stay right with this one person, not thinking about, oh, I've got to ask her that question later today.
Yes. So I never think about those things, just like I don't think about what I'm going to ask you. It will, or at least hopefully I'm not going to think about it. It's just going to come out kind of innately. And I think the hardest part when you're interviewing people in a crowd like that is staying focused on the person because there's a crowd, right? There's a throbbing crowd of people that are, and it's just human nature when somebody is being interviewed and they see it, people just stop and go, "Oh, what's this?" And
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden you have this group of individuals that are all, and you just have to completely and utterly block that out.
yeah, yeah.
But
Interesting.
enough of me. Let's talk about John Bell. Let's
Oh my
hear.
gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. We had dinner with Ed Mel, and I got to sit next to you in Santa Fe, and I got to hear the stories, some of the stories, and I kept saying, "No, don't tell me anymore. I don't,
Yeah,
it's too
that's right.
good. It is too good." And so, I mean, I looked at this resume. Let's kind of just start from the beginning. Usually, you have such an interesting background as far as what you have done artistically, creatively, and all that. But I want to get a sense of where it all began. In other words, where'd you grow up?
Yeah. Well, I grew up back in New Jersey, in North Jersey, a town called Montclair. And I had two older brothers, or I have two older brothers. My dad worked for the record company, Columbia Records in New York City.
Oh, that's
And
interesting. What did he
he,
do?
w- he was in marketing. But before that, he played saxophone and clarinet in big bands in Philly and New York and that whole Northeast area.
Well, how
And
long did he do that?
once he started having kids,
Yeah.
he transitioned out of that,
But how long did
to
he
a
do
real
that where
job.
he's doing big band playing like for 10 years or so?
Yeah, at least 10 years, probably closer to 15 years.
And this is like
Yeah,
late 40s to mid 50s kind of thing.
late,
Wow.
late 40s up until I was born. That kind of my birth cut off his musical industry,
I
his
see.
musical career.
And did he remind you that on occasion?
No, he didn't, but he had a strong influence in my life later on that we can touch on as we go through the years. But um, yeah, I grew up in North Jersey, had a love for cars, building car models and the space race, of course, is going on in the 60s. So I'm growing up in the 60s with all that as an interest as well. Sci-fi, Star Trek, those things.
Right.
And
Do you remember?
always drawing.
Yeah. Do you remember the Star Trek, the original Star Trek series, very
Oh
well
yeah.
when it came on?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember us not having a color TV and having to go down the street or try to, you
Mhm.
know, work our way into our neighbor's house so we could watch color TV on their set.
Yeah, I remember that series quite well, actually. I guess it was
Yeah.
just of that time. You're a little younger, a little older than me, so you got it right when it came out. I think I was probably already maybe toward reruns. I don't know. But yeah, it
Mhm.
was, it was very influential, no doubt. And so you're drawing and doing things at that point, right? Already?
Yeah, yeah. My oldest brother, he was the best of the three of us to draw and build models. He was really good at it, but for some reason, it didn't stick with him as a passion. He didn't keep with it. So he kind of dropped out.
Hmm.
But then my middle brother, well, my second oldest brother, he's continued it. He has a sign shop back in, he stayed in New Jersey, and he's got a sign shop with his wife that he runs. He's been doing that for 30 years now.
And he makes hand painted signs and different things like that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Back then, when he first started, it was a lot of gold leaf and hand carving wood signs and
Right.
real artistic stuff. And now it's all just quick laser cut. Give me something simple and quick. You know, so
About,
kind of the creativity left.
about like very similar to probably what we'll find out has kind of changed in your business too over the last 40 years or so.
Yeah.
And so you were drawing, and at that point you were talking about grade school, middle school type thing. Did you start that early?
Yeah, actually, yeah. My first paying gig was in sixth grade. I was drawing cars a lot and hot rods and dragsters and things. And friend in class, he said, I'll give you 25 cents if you draw me a 1968 Camaro."
I take it that was
So I got 25
1968.
cents.
What was that, 68 when you
Yeah,
did that?
yeah.
Yeah.
And 25 cents back in 1968, you could buy 25 pieces of gum.
Oh yeah, that
So
was a lot. No.
that was great. That was, like a whole weekend right there.
And so do you still have a relationship with that friend? I wonder if he still has the
I
car.
I do. He has the drawing still. He sent me a picture of he framed it and put it on his wall.
Wow.
And he sent a picture of that to me about 5 years ago. I was shocked.
How was it, by the way, when you
Oh my gosh. The wheels are all kind of wonky and
yeah.
the lines aren't really that good.
How
But
old were you at that point?
I was 10 years old, 11 years old.
Yeah, you were 10. Okay. Yeah. You are
Yeah.
about my age then. And so the and then and then from that point, so clearly you're like, okay, I'm making money by doing this. What happened after that as far as your art component of that?
Well, then we'll jump into high school. In high school, I was still not studying as I should have, and I was drawing more cars, and my brothers and I were really into the drag racing scene. And we talked my dad into going to the drags every weekend because the track was about 45 minutes away.
Oh my gosh.
And so we'd go down to the drags, and I would do a lot of drawings, and that kind of turned into a little bit of a business. Even when I was a teenager, I was able to start designing paint schemes for the race cars, the funny cars as they were called.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a pen pal who lived in California, a guy named Kenny Youngblood, who's a big automotive artist. Somehow I was able to get his address, and we started a pen pal thing, and I'd ask him questions about how to make things look shiny or how to get perspective correct. And we would have these big, letters flying back and forth. And he became an idol for me after a while.
Was he working already in the field? Was it what was
He was like the guy to design and render illustrations for the drag racers. And I thought, when I grow up, I want to be Kenny Youngblood. I want to do what he's doing.
and
And
and so that's in high school. So you're clearly very focused to be able to track down one of the top guys and correspond with him.
yeah, yeah. And started to do what he was doing. I was literally designing paint schemes for cars that were going down the drag strip.
And
which
selling it to the guys who are doing the cars and saying, I can help you.
well, I kind of landed this type of work from being close to one of the premier custom paint shops in the country called Circus Custom Paint. Back, it was about 5 miles from our house.
Mm.
So I'd ride my bike down over there and bug them, what car is coming in, who's driving, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And he would, they'd give me assignments.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so when you get out of high school, you realize you're going to do this clearly, right? I mean, it sounds like you're right on that path.
Yeah. So my dad, he was still kind of loosely associated with the music business. And so he'd taken a trip to California back in 1975, 76. And I guess after one of his meetings, he went down to a bar, started chatting up some ladies, even though he's married with 3 kids. But he ends up talking about his sons and about me, particularly about my love of designing and drawing cars. And one of the women said, well, there's a school called Art Center over here that has a transportation design, you know, classes to teach people how to draw cars and design cars. So he came back from that trip, told me all about it. And so I wrote Art Center. I said, well, that sounds interesting. So I wrote them, learned that I had to put a portfolio together and sent it off. And I waited to get a response, and luckily they responded. So at 18 years old, I left New Jersey, drove my little Honda Civic,
Mm-hmm.
3,000 miles across country with my parents in the car.
Mm.
You
Mm-hmm.
remember how small those Civics were in the
I
mid
do.
70s. Made it out to Art Center, and that was the start of my Art Center career.
Did you have any plan B if you didn't get into Art Center?
Nope.
Uh-huh. It's like, oh,
No,
no.
and what's funny is I thought that I would learn how to draw funny cars and dragsters, and then I'd move back to New Jersey when I was done, and I'd become Kenny Youngblood and do what he did.
Yeah.
But
And
Art Center completely changed my trajectory.
yeah, and what did it change?
Well, I learned more about not just drawing cars, but actually car design,
Mm-hmm.
and learning that, wow, people at this school are designing cars for General Motors and Fiat and Ford and Chrysler and all the other big companies. And so I still enjoyed doing this stuff for the drag racers, and I continued doing that into the 80s and 90s. But I graduated in a class of 4 people graduated in the transportation class.
Mm-hmm.
2 of us got jobs, myself and a man named Chris Bangle. And Chris was supposed to go to Detroit and work for General Motors. I was supposed to go to work in Germany and work for General Motors Opel division.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was in love with a woman, and I didn't think she was going to want to move to Germany. So I said, hey, Chris, what if I go to Detroit and you go to Germany? He said, really? You want to do that? Yeah, let's pitch it to him. And so
Yeah.
GM agreed and said, all right, Bell, you're going to Detroit. Chris, you're going to Germany. And that too completely changed our lives. I only stayed in the car industry at General Motors for about less than 2 years. Chris, on the other hand, goes on to become head of BMW design and never comes back to the States.
Yeah, my God. Do you guys keep in touch at all?
Oh yeah, we're still close friends to this day.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to hear the little tidbits of your life that are changing not only for you but for Chris. I mean, whether it's the magic paint place that happens to be right next to in New Jersey, the
yeah,
top paint place, or your dad having drinks with somebody in LA, and now this flip. I mean, and that's how our lives are to some extent.
yeah,
When we really retrospectively look at them, there's these little branches you don't recognize them until much later. So this is like
yeah.
80. So you graduate college in like 81.
81, yeah,
Yeah.
January 81.
Yeah.
So I was off to Detroit.
And that
And
lasted 2 years?
yeah, it lasted just about 2 years.
How about the
And
girl?
well, we ended up getting married and divorced.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, there was something there too. Positive or negative or both. Yeah.
yeah,
So it
big
did
talks
work
going
from your
on.
aspect. She did go with you then.
She did, yeah, she did. And yeah, Detroit was interesting. It was, it's not like it was in the 60s where General Motors specifically was really at the top of their game.
Hmm.
By 1980, 81, with the fuel crisis and things like that, Detroit was in really bad shape. And and a lot of the guys, I'm 22 coming out of college, and the guys I'm working with are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're all kind of just taking their time and slowing down. And you're coming out of school, you've got a lot of energy, you want to do a lot of things, you want to shake up a lot of things, and I could see that that wasn't going to be the case so much for my being there.
Hmm.
So I started to think about, well, what could I do if I'm not going to work in Detroit as a car designer? And another funny happen chance thing happened. I had a friend at Art Center named Peter, and he was working for a game company called Atari
Hmm.
in the Bay Area. So he called me like out of the blue. I'd never expected, once we were out of school, I'd never expected hearing from him again. And he calls me and we're talking. And he says, how do you like General Motors? I said, Peter, I'm not really digging it right now. I don't feel like I'm fitting in. How about you? How do you like Atari? And he goes, oh gosh, Atari's great. I said, well, and I paused and he goes, why don't you send me some work, so, send me your portfolio and resume and I'll show it around and see if I can get you to at least come out for an interview. And you get, a week in Northern California.
Right.
So I went out for the interview and I got the job and moved from Detroit to the Bay Area in 1982.
Yeah, that was a happening time. That was a good time to be getting into games. And what kind of games did they built at that time?
Wow, they had just done an ET game and they were working on a Indiana Jones game at the
Mm.
time. The division I was in, we were working on things called laser discs. Do you remember laser discs?
Yeah, of course.
Like the size of an album, but it was going
Yeah,
to play a video game
right.
or a movie.
Yeah.
So they were trying to work on it was a Clint Eastwood movie. It was like an action movie with a helicopter. I can't remember the title of the film, but they were trying to do a laser disc version of that movie.
Uh,
And so that was our division of 30 people um, that were working on that project and other advanced design projects. Um,
and so what do you do at that? What are you doing at Atari? What's your job?
so it's very similar to what I do now as far as being a concept artist. Um, coming up with what the game is going to look like, what kind of characters might be in the game, um, paying attention to the movie theme and working with that theme in the imagery that I'm creating.
Hmm. So
But there are other,
you're really a visual storyteller,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I'd say I've always liked drawing because I don't feel like I'm a very good communicator verbally. So that's why I took up drawing, and being a more introverted person too was being able to draw something was a way to maybe get out of a bullying situation or to meet new people or whatever it was.
It's your gift and it's the way you communicate.
Yeah, yeah,
So you're doing outlines for what the game or the movie that you're interpreting for the game, what the concept of how you could see doing this, right?
yeah, yeah. And there was another game that we were developing at the same time, a Laserdisc game that had to deal, the story was around a haunted amusement park,
Mm,
which is kind of a really tired theme at this point, but in 1983, it was fairly fresh.
right.
So I got to meet a guy who had been doing a lot of visual effects for the movie and TV industry named Richard Taylor. And he liked the work that I was doing for this haunted amusement park game. And um, he and I kept in touch a couple of years later once I had left Atari. So
And what
that
caused
was
you,
fun getting to interesting.
yeah, what caused you to leave Atari?
Um, it was kind of the Atari wasn't doing as well as it was 3 years earlier. This was 1985, and it was the decline was starting to happen for them. Other video game companies were starting to pop up, and the competition was there. But I knew I liked the Bay Area, and so I put together some slides for a portfolio, and I knew that George Lucas had his company Industrial Light and Magic up in the North Bay.
Hmm.
So I put together a slide sheet and a little introductory letter and sent it over to them. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And nothing was happening. Thought, okay, what am I going to do now? I want to leave Atari. Maybe I'll try to get back into the car design business again. Ford had a design studio in Southern California. I thought, well, maybe I could get connected with them and get back into the car design business. So like 8 months went by, and phone rang one morning, and the woman I was with at the time said, "Hey, somebody from Industrial Light and Magic wants to talk to you. Do you want to?" And I thought she was putting me on. She goes, "No, somebody is on the phone. They want to talk to you." So I got out of bed, got on the phone, and they said, "Can you come up? Our art director, Nilo, he wants to meet you." So I said, "Yeah, okay." So I called in sick at Atari, drove up to San Rafael, and I
Yeah.
met Nilo Rodis. He was a big time designer on the Star Wars films, specifically Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, designing speeder bikes and costumes and weapons and all kinds of things. And I thought, wow, I'm going to meet this guy. So met him. Kind of long story short, I got a job with him, but he says, "I'm going to give you 30 days. I can only commit to 30 days." I said, "All right, I'll take it." I wanted to get out of Atari that bad. And so I go up there and I start and I give my notice at Atari. Like I said, "I'm leaving tomorrow." And they said, "You need to give us a 2 week notice." And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't. I've got this job at Lucasfilm now. I want to take it. So I'm sorry, but I got to go."
Mhm.
And so I left and worked at Lucasfilm. And the stress, I had never done the type of work. They wanted me to do storyboarding, and I'd never really done storyboarding before. But they just Nilo handed me the script and says, "Here's a script. I need you to start storyboarding it." I'm going, "What?" He goes, "Just whatever comes into your head as far as a picture, just start drawing it out."
Yes.
And the stress, I would go home with the most intense headaches and strain in my shoulders and everything. I wasn't eating. And Nilo finally, about a week or two into it, he goes, I'm going to have to let you go. I know you can do this work because I just know what I've seen in your portfolio, but for some reason you can't do it. So I'm sorry, I got to let you go." So I thought, oh, great. I've left my job. I burned the bridge at Atari.
Yep. Big
I'm
time.
not going to be working at Industrial Light Magic. So now what am I going to do? Another happen chance thing happens. I've already had the phone call from a guy from Atari. Now I'm walking down the sidewalk in the middle of the day in Palo Alto, and this guy that I knew named Bill, I see him. I go, "Hey, Bill, what's happening?" He goes, "Hey, we're starting a toy company right here in town. You should come work for us." Okay, I'm not doing anything else. So I start working for this startup toy company, educational toy company in Palo Alto. About 3 months into that, Nilo calls on the phone from Industrial Light and Magic again. Hey, John, I have more time to work with you. If you'll come back, I'd love to work with you again. So I got hired back. I said, Bill, I'm sorry, I'm leaving the toy company. I'm going back to Lucasfilm.
Uh-huh. Why do you think he called? Why do you think he revisited you?
I don't know, but he and I are still close friends to this day. He's the sweetest, most generous guy.
Yeah. There was something that he saw in you, clearly, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you went back, which was a big major deal because that's obviously a pivotal point, I can tell, in your life and continues to be. And so he started actually helping you, working with you. And you're what, like 26?
26, yeah,
Yeah.
26, 27.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the project I started working on was Star Trek 4. I don't know if you remember that one, but they go out to save the whales and bring them back in time.
Right.
So I'm doing storyboarding, but he's just giving me like small sequences. You know, the ship, the Enterprise has to go this way, or it has to go that way, or just really simple A to B type camera movements.
Right.
So I'm learning that.
And so do you have to understand directors and things at this point?
Well, I had to understand um, camera direction, but he was really letting me come up with whatever came into my head. It was, John, we want to have the Enterprise come toward us. So just pick an angle that you feel is dramatic or you feel like fits this moment in the film. And so I would just sketch up something, and sometimes he'd say yes, and sometimes he would say no. And I knew I was making progress because if I was doing the sketches, he would normally come over with a Sharpie,
Mhm.
like a red Sharpie or a big black Sharpie, and he would just make notes right on the drawing that I was doing. But at one point, I had done the storyboards, and he said, "Can I have a piece of tissue paper?" And he put the tissue paper on, and then he made his notes. Oh, okay, I'm making progress now.
He doesn't want to destroy it.
Yeah. So and he would just give me a little bit more rope and a little bit more and a little bit more, and actually start to design some props for the film and things that actually got into the movie. So
Like what?
he was such a great mentor. Just small things, like some handheld communicator type things. You know, um, there was one instrument, I can't remember the name of it, but they had to find out if there was like some radioactivity. It was like a Geiger counter, I
Right.
guess, for lack of better words. And then there was an escape hatch that Shatner had to escape through at one point.
Right.
So there was different things like that. So even those little things, you're sitting in the theater and you go, wow, they actually liked it enough to put it in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be pretty thrilling, even if you were to watch the movie now going, yeah, that was mine.
Yeah, because it starts off with just a piece of Xerox paper, pencil and pen, and a couple magic markers, and it's
Did you ever
great.
meet Shatner at all?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
When they were filming the movie, we went out to lunch. There was a great Italian restaurant in San Rafael, and so about 6 or 8 of us went over to lunch, and the hostess was a big Shatner fan, and
Hmm.
she was really, you know, all over him. Do
Right.
you have enough food? How do you like the food? Can I get you more wine? Do you
Right.
want some more water? She was really
Huh. And what was he
all
like?
over. He was very nice. He was I can't say, again, being kind of shy at that time, and I wanted to give him his space, and so there wasn't a lot of interaction with me and him, but he came across as being very genuine, very interested in everybody and their role in the film, and so it was really pleasant
Yeah.
to
There was
see.
a recent podcast with Mark Maron and Shatner, which I encourage people to go listen to because Shatner's a really interesting guy. I had no idea how interesting he is. And he's like 90 years old and he's got dozens of projects and all sorts of
Yeah.
things coming out. And he's unique,
I
actually.
just started reading his book called Boldly Go.
Yes,
And I didn't know, yeah, how spiritual he is
very
and
much so.
very empathetic he is,
Yep.
and his love of nature and horses and dogs. And I've only gotten about a third of the way through, but fascinating guy.
Yeah, no, he really is. Yeah, much more than I would have ever anticipated, but he really
Yeah.
is a unique person. So shout out
Yeah.
to Shatner here.
Yeah.
So
I
how
got
long do you
intrigued
work?
in,
Yeah, I was gonna say, how long do you work at Lucasfilm? Is it considered Lucasfilms at that point, or yes?
it was still, yeah, David worked really for, working on creating the brand name of Industrial Light and Magic because there were really no other visual effects companies around at the time.
Hmm.
So if a director like Spielberg or Zemeckis or somebody wanted to do a film, have their effects done, they would go to Industrial Light and Magic.
Which allowed you to work on a great number of films, right?
Yeah. I was there from I've been there numerous times, but the first time I was there was from 1985 to 1991. So in that time, I was working on Star Trek 4 and then Tucker, the movie Tucker, about the car, the automobile,
Yeah, it was
and
great.
then the sequel to the movie Cocoon
Yep,
and Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 3, and The Rocketeer.
that was
It's a
also
lot of
a good movie.
films in a short period of time.
And you also did worked on Jurassic Park, right?
I'd met the production designer for Back to the Future 2 was another very important person in my life and my career as a man named Rick Carter. And I'd actually started doing some sketches for Back to the Future 2 in 1986. Um, the somebody from the ILM, one of the producers came into the art department and said, Bob Zemeckis, he's going to do a sequel on Back to the Future. We don't have a script yet. We know we go 30 years in the future, and there's something called hoverboards. And can you just start coming up with some ideas for what Hill Valley could look like, or what hoverboards are, or what
Hmm.
anything that comes to mind of 30 years, we're on 30 years in the future. So, 2015. So I did about 30 different sketches, and then I got pulled on to the movie Willow to work on
Hmm.
Willow.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, that was fun too.
Yeah.
Um, so those sketches just kind of sat for a while. Bob Zemeckis then he put that project aside. He was going to do Roger Rabbit.
Hmm.
So as he's working on Roger Rabbit, these sketches are just kind of sitting. They sent them down to his art department, where a man named Rick Carter saw them. I got to meet Rick Carter in 1988 when the Back to the Future 2 project was gearing up. And Rick came up and with a couple other people from the art department, Rick was talking to me about the sketches he'd seen a couple of years earlier. He really liked them. Was it possible if I could come down to the art department in Los Angeles to work on the film on 2015 specifically? So ILM lent me out. They said, okay, we'll lend John out for like 3 weeks. Well, 3 weeks turned into almost 5 months. I'm down in Los Angeles. I'm working with the costume designer. I'm working with the art department, all these different things. And Rick Carter, another very generous man,
Hmm.
um, just let me get involved with all sorts of things. Design the hover. Can give me what hoverboards look like. Can you give me what Hill Valley, stop signs and the town square looks like? And he just gave me so many things to do on the project. It was really remarkable.
It was a great movie too, actually. I really enjoyed. All these movies are ones I really like, or maybe says something about my personality at that time. And so you did all these storyboard, they were, would you consider them storyboards or would you consider them, seems like it's more than that actually,
Yeah, for Back to the Future 2, it was more concept art. It
yeah,
was designing the dog walker, it was designing the hoverboards for Michael J. Fox's character and the
right,
and Griff's gang, and
right.
then doing some storyboards for that sequence. So again, it was a lot designing the taxi cab. So I got to do car design again, So I designed the flying taxi. I designed the bottom of the DeLorean. Nobody had ever seen the bottom of the
I
DeLorean.
remember that shot.
Somebody said at ILM, said, hey, the bottle maker who worked on the original DeLorean for the Back to the original Back to the Future film, Steve Gawley, he says, hey, John, nobody's seen the bottom of the DeLorean. You've got to design it. So I designed the bottom of the DeLorean. So weird things just kind of would pop in and out. And that was the fun of ILM, is that you never knew really what you're going to be working on from month to month. Somebody will come into the art department and say, hey, we need some sketches for this, and we need some sketches for that.
And how
It's
big was
pretty.
the art department?
At times it was me.
Yeah.
At times it was Nilo, Phil Norwood, Dave Carson, and me. And so it ranged from a single person to um, when I left in 91, there was about 8 or 9 people
Mm.
because they had multiple films. They had James Cameron as a client then. They had Bob Zemeckis. They had Joe Johnston. They had a lot of different directors at the time were now using the ILM art department as a resource to design props and storyboard things for their visual effects.
So you must have worked with some of the directors as well. They would have come in, Spielberg and these different individuals, Lucas, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, because they're kind of, some of them are probably very hands-on versus some are not as much. I would expect that Luke or that Spielberg was more of a hands-on kind of individual.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we touched on that at the dinner table
Yeah.
that night, is that Spielberg was a great collaborator to work with, very much open. If he got stuck on an idea, you could throw out an idea and sometimes you'd say, yeah, that works right now. Or some other, you might say, let's save that for later. I like that idea. Or at other times he'd say, no, that doesn't work for where I want to eventually go with the story. But he was super collaborative, you know. And George, he was kind of the opposite. He'd come in and he'd mark the drawings, but he wouldn't give you a lot of verbal input as to what he liked or didn't like. You just kind of, okay, he liked that one and that one and that one and that one. What's the common denominator here, or what's he seeing? And then it was up to us to put things together and try to anticipate what he was going to like next.
I would think after a while you would get good at going, okay, I understand kind of how his mind's thinking, and this is the proper way to move forward.
Yeah. I was really only working with him on Willow, and my time on that was only a few months, and then I got moved right off
The
onto
next one.
onto the next one. Yeah.
And so what all did you do, let's say in Jurassic Park? Because it was such an influential, you know, on everything, right? I mean, it's so
Yeah.
influential. It's amazing because the Best of Show pot by Jennifer Tafoya at this Indian market was dinosaurs on her pot, and I
Mhm.
haven't asked her, but I imagine Jurassic Park somewhere fits into that.
Yeah, it was a real, you know, pivotal moment for the whole entire film industry,
Yeah.
because up to that point, CGI was really used sparingly. Like they would remove, like say for the hoverboard scene, they would remove the wires that were holding up the hoverboard riders,
Hmm.
things like that. Or, you replace the sky. If the sky was gray one day, you put in a blue sky. So limited things like that. But once, they were going on Jurassic Park, Phil Tippett, who was the premier stop motion animator, he had, worked on this. He'd done all the stop motion film for all the Star Wars films. Every creature, the Tauntaun, and forgetting some of the names of the creatures, but he would do all the stop motion creature work. He was going to be doing all the stop motion work for Jurassic Park because they didn't know if CGI could do it.
Hmm.
Well, there was like this rebel group at ILM, consisted of 4 people, and they were making breakthroughs in CGI at the time. And 2 of them in particular, Mark DePay and Steve Williams, really went off on their own and started animating and creating dinosaurs that moved in skeletal form, just to see if they could get them to look quasi-real. And so they got to a point where they showed them to the one of the top effects supervisors named Dennis Muren. Dennis Muren saw what they were doing and said, "This is pretty remarkable. We're going to have to show it to Spielberg and Phil Tippett." And so they showed the sequence to the 2 of them, and Spielberg loved what he'd seen. He went crazy for it. So the next step was to put some skin and muscles and everything to really flesh out a T-Rex and a couple different dinosaur types, species. And so they did that, and it just, turned everything around. It just blew away everybody's conceptions of what could be done with a computer. And here was Phil Tippett, his whole career has been stop motion, where,
Right.
if anything about stop motion, it's move the head, take a picture,
Right.
move the arm, take a picture. So it's hours and days just to get 10 seconds of film. And with CGI, we can do this in half a day. So for him, he felt really crushed, but it was his knowledge of and his passion for how dinosaurs moved, and his passion was learning about dinosaurs. He just loved animal behavior in general, and he was a very integral part into creating how these dinosaurs in the film were going to behave with one another, the way the raptors would snap at each other and interact with each other, and the way they worked as a pair, and how the T-Rex would come into a scene. And so he brought those creatures to life.
And that's Phil Tippett.
Phil Tippett, yeah.
Phil Tippett, yeah. And so how did that change what he did? I'm just curious from there going on.
Well, he had to evolve. He had to evolve just like the dinosaurs evolved.
Yeah,
He had to
sounds like
go
he pivoted.
he had to go from analog to digital.
Yeah.
And he ended up working on the RoboCop films, doing animation for those. And he did Starship Trooper was really the big CGI film for his studio,
Yeah.
Studios, and they're still active over in Berkeley, California. Starship Troopers, all these giant insects and bugs and creatures and what have you, they created their own studio to do CGI work.
And is he still doing stuff? Do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So clearly he was able to pivot quite nicely, and
He was.
yeah, well, you build on that thing. Just like he is, you're building on everything that you're learning and doing, because you're seeing this stuff change too. What was your role in Jurassic Park? What were your,
My official role was co-art director, and my friendship with my working friendship with Rick Carter. He found me I was up in Montana that summer of 1991. And I don't know how he found me, because I didn't tell really anybody where I was going. But he found me up in Montana, and he said, "I'm working on this film, Jurassic Park." And I said, "What? Jurassic? What's Jurassic? Jurassic what?" He goes, "Yeah, Jurassic Park. It's about dinosaurs. This book, Michael Crichton book. You got to read this book, Michael Crichton. We're doing a film about it. Spielberg's directing it." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Yeah, when can you start?" And this was early July. He goes, "Well, Rick, I just I just got up to Montana. I was going to take a month or two, to just kind of relax and unwind and travel. And so we negotiated a time. How about September? And he goes, okay, September. I can wait till September. So in 1991, I go down to start working on Jurassic Park in Los Angeles. And again, very generous man. Here's the script, John. We've already done a lot of work on the film. I just want you to look at everything that's been done so far, but I really want to have your take. What's speaking to you from the script, and what do you visualize? And that's what I really want to get from you on this film. So I just started I started thumbnailing some sequences, some storyboards, and then I learned about the Jeep or whatever, the cars going through the park. And I thought, okay, well, would they actually build, a specific car like in Disneyland? They would build, something specific for the park, or would they just take existing vehicles and modify them?
Mm-hmm.
So I started drawing cars. So I thought, okay, I get to do car design again. And I get to do design paint schemes like I did when I was a teenager for drag racers.
Right.
So I'm doing these crazy dinosaur themed paint jobs on Ford Explorers and Range Rovers and
Right.
different things like that. And so I got to do a lot of different things. I got to do a lot of design for the visitor center. I like to say a lot of stuff that got destroyed, I got to design, like the cars, and the visitor center, and things like that.
And so you read the whole script, you have a sense of what the movie is, but you're really looking for that deep thematic that runs through the entire movie that you have to try to somehow bring to life through the animation, right? Or through art, whatever the story, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And my take, when I was reading it, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be more of kind of an adult, scary film.
Yeah, it was.
And it
Was for me.
But my mistake was not realizing that I didn't have kids at the time. But I learned later on that kids really dig dinosaurs.
Oh yeah.
They really do. And so the things that I was visualizing and presenting to Rick were a lot darker in tone than what they really wanted to go for. But some of the things made it into the film, that I was pretty proud of. I don't know if I told you this at the dinner, but there's that scene where the T-Rex comes out at night. It's raining.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are trapped in one car, and the adults are trapped in the other car, yards away. And the way it was originally storyboarded was that the adults were just kind of wait and see what happens with the T-Rex and the kids. And I thought, if I was in that situation and I was an adult, I would do something, anything. And so I thought, well, in the back of this car, maybe there's some supplies like flashlight or a road flare or something. And so I thought, well, okay, let's try this road flare idea. And I'll have one of the adults get out of the car with a road flare and wave it towards the T-Rex to distract him away from the kids. So he'll be chased, and the kids and the other adult will be able to go over to the car and rescue the kids out of the car. So that was that was a pretty big idea that I thought I had, and actually made it into the film. So that was pretty cool.
And a scary image, right? I mean, really, I remember seeing that part of the film. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
Jeff Goldblum.
I didn't know you had done that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it came out, did you have, I mean, it was a massive hit, right? What was that like, and how did that change your trajectory? Or maybe it didn't, I don't know.
Wow. It was, in hindsight, I wish I had understood how big a film that was going to be. At the time, I thought, oh yeah, dinosaur film. It's pretty cool. You know, they did some really great effects in it.
Right.
Sometimes I just see 5 feet in front of me when I should be seeing 5,000 feet in front of me, or you know.
Right.
And so yeah, it was a pivotal point. Film came out in '93, and I thought, well, gosh, the next step was in the kind of the hierarchy of film structure is you go from an art director to a production designer. And so I thought that was always something I really wanted to do. Even when I was first working at ILM, I wanted to become a production designer. And now it's right at the next step right in front of me. But I thought, I'm probably going to have to live in Los Angeles. I, I really didn't like living in Los Angeles to begin with. So I was anticipating I'd go down and live in Los Angeles for Jurassic Park. And then once it's done, I'll be able to move back to the Bay Area,
Hmm.
you know, and do work up there. So when the opportunity came to possibly work in Los Angeles, I went, I really don't want to do this. So if I don't want to do that, don't want to be a production designer, what am I going to do? And there happened chance meeting. I met some people on Back to the Future 2 who worked for Nike. And at the time, back in 1988, they said, if you ever want to get out of the film business and you're looking to design something else, give us a call. We'd like to maybe see what you can do. So I called up Nike in 1993 and I ended up going to Nike.
What do you think the fact that you basically had reached what you'd always wanted, which were, and that goal was there, it's a production manager, that's what it's called,
Mm, production designer.
production designer, that you reached it and you go, okay, I reached that goal. Now I get to decide, do I want that goal? And when it was really in front of you, you go, no, I don't want to live in LA. I know I reached it. That fulfills me to know I had the capability to get to it, but I'm not doing LA, so I'm going on to something else.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's it because I did a few years later become a production designer. But at that time, my then girlfriend, and you met her at dinner the other night,
Yeah.
Wendy said she had secretly gone around because she'd worked at Spielberg's company in various positions down there. She had gone off the Art of book had come out of Jurassic Park. Unbeknownst to me, she had gone around to different people on the project, including Spielberg, to sign it.
Hmm.
So she got Spielberg to sign the book, and it says, and Spielberg's signature says, I need production designers. I went, oh no. Now what do I do? So when I turned it down, when I turned down that invitation, basically,
Right.
Wendy thought I was off my rocker. Like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, but
Don't you know what you're doing here?
there's a reason you did that.
There was. I had to hold true to my convictions. I knew that I would probably be happy, definitely would be happy working with Spielberg again, or whoever I would be possibly working with on projects in LA. But I thought living in LA, I just didn't want to do it. It
Yeah.
was that intense for me to not want to be down there.
Yeah. I get it. I felt the same way when I lived in LA. I couldn't
Yeah.
wait to get out.
And 1991, 92, that was when the riots happened too.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that too.
And it was weird because a couple months before the riots happened, I had just gotten down into LA and I was having dinner with his friend Jeff, and I said, "Hey Jeff, what's going on down here? There's some kind of tension in the air. It just feels like something is gonna happen. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel right. It's not laid back LA like I remembered it from 10 years earlier. I thought
Right.
something's going on." He said, "Yeah, I don't know what it is, but if you're feeling it, I'm feeling it too." And
Yeah.
5 months later, everything
Rodney,
goes off.
yeah. Rodney King just blew it up.
Yeah.
So you leave and go to Nike, and so is that in Seattle or not Seattle?
It
It's
was
up
in Portland,
Portland.
outside
Yeah.
west of Portland, in a town called Beaverton.
Yes, that's right, Beaverton. And
And
what did
what
you
they had
do?
outlined for me
Yeah.
was I would get involved with apparel design, footwear design, graphics, and I don't know if you remember Nike Town, the
Yeah,
stores.
of course. Yeah.
You'd get involved in all those different aspects. That's what made me say, yeah, that sounds like fun. I'm getting to design a lot of variety.
Right.
That sounds great. Well, about less than 6 months into it, they've kind of pigeonholed me into footwear design. Thinking, okay, I didn't come up here for this.
Right. You're back in Detroit now.
I am. It's funny. It was very similar to car design because, foot's not changing. So how many different stylistic lines can you possibly do
Right.
while maintaining their so-called performance authenticity? You know, it's not fashion,
Right.
it's performance footwear. So everything had to be pretty dictated. And I thought, I can't do this. So about 2 years into that, similar to the car industry, I left. I was still getting a lot of freelance work from film projects. So I thought, I'm just going to move back to the Bay Area, roll the dice, and see if I can do, freelance full time for the film industry.
And that's
And
what you did.
what I did.
And so what did you do in that time frame in this period? This is like 85 or 95.
Yeah, mid 90s. So Starship Trooper
Yep.
was the one. So Phil Tippett got me involved in Starship Trooper.
Yep. They're probably all excited. He's back.
I know. It was fun. It was great because Phil is a very passionate, very animated guy. We're working on Starship Trooper, and he'd come into the art department. This is down in LA. He'd come into the art department, and the director, Paul Verhoeven, who's another very passionate director, they'd come in and they would act out these battle scenes, which would normally end up with one of them laying on the floor and the other one standing over him, pretending to bayonet him or shoot him with a machine gun. And it's loud, and they're just moving things and throwing things, and it was incredible. Because you're just sitting there as a spectator watching these guys act out these big scenes. No, the bug's going to go, and you're going to go, ah.
Well, they know that you can take those visual cues and then turn them into an entire story. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're smart.
So that was fun. So let me see, what other films at that time? Men in Black. I got to contribute early on to Men in Black.
Was that the first one?
The first one.
Yeah. And were you involved in designing some of those great creatures?
Well, it was really early on, and sometimes those early on things don't make it all the way to the end result. So
Yes.
I can't say that a lot of the exact things made it into the final film. But what I had done is I presented a lot of boards, like reference boards, where you think this is the tone of the film that I think it should be in. And it was this kind of streamlined, nobody was doing this streamlined early 60s Mad Men
Mm.
kind of visualization of a period film or design for a film. So I thought that'd be really cool, 62 Lincoln Continentals and guys in sharkskin suits and the Brat Pack, and everything is super tailored and streamlined. I thought that should be the look for these guys in this film. That should be the look of their headquarters.
Mm.
World's Fair 1964.
Yeah.
It was all that.
That's a critical part of the entire plot, right? I mean, that's where the aliens come down at the end and the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had not thought
So
about that concept at that point.
yeah, so that was the initial take. So that registered with the director and Barry Sonnenfeld, and off
Yeah.
it went. And then this film Contact, Jodie Foster, she
Yeah. Great
goes
film.
into the fourth dimension.
Yep. I love that film.
again, Rick Carter, he got me involved in that.
Wow.
And we have a credit, we share a credit, fourth dimensional consultant. He he says it's the best film credit, John, you're ever going to have.
Probably the only one that's had anything like that either.
That's right.
And so you also are winning awards, I'm assuming, with all this work that you're doing at some point.
On Back to the Future 2, I got nominated for an Academy Award for visual effects, but we lost to a movie called The Abyss,
Oh yeah, good
which
movie.
used CGI
Yeah.
incredibly with the water snake.
Oh yeah, I remember it very well.
That
Good.
was another big breakthrough CGI moment.
Yeah.
Um, that was just a year and a half before Jurassic Park. And so, yeah, Academy Award nomination for that. Won a BAFTA award for Back to the Future 2.
Tell people what that is.
That is the British version of the Academy Award.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are big awards, big time. You're
Yeah.
you're a leader in your field for what you do, right? And
Yeah. I
so,
guess so.
oh, for sure, obviously. And then at any point in time, are you going, kind of like to be making my own art too? I mean, it has to be there somewhere, I would think.
Not yet really, because the same year that I was working on Contact, 1996, I got a call from Spielberg Studio, and they're going to do an animated feature called Ants,
Love that show.
and with Woody Allen as the main character.
Yeah.
And so they needed a production designer. So I called Rick Carter. Rick Carter, they want me to be a production designer on this film. I don't know if I can do it. He goes, yeah, you can do it. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to say you couldn't, and they fire you.
Right.
He'll do something else.
Yeah.
So so I went down and met Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and I said, yeah, let's do it. I'd love to do it. Sadly, the film didn't do as well as Pixar's Bug's Life,
Yeah.
but it was a good experience for me. I'm glad I did it. The studio that I was working for, they weren't really DreamWorks yet. They were called Pacific Data Images,
Hmm.
PDI. And it was their first film. They'd done a lot of TV commercial work, but this was their first film. And so it was great taking what I'd learned working at Industrial Light Magic and working with different directors and helping them develop their studio to be able to do feature length films. So it was a good experience.
So you get this upgrade as far as what you're what you do, which is big for ants. And then does that propel you to do other things in that same field, or what do you do?
I thought it would, but since the film really didn't do as well in the box office as DreamWorks had hoped,
Yeah.
it didn't work out that way. And their next film was going to be Shrek.
Hmm.
And I suggested that they use the art director on Ants, a woman named Kendall Cronkite. I said, why don't you give Kendall a chance? She should be production designer on this next one. I'll figure out something else. Well, my something else led me to exiting the building. I voluntarily left, and I thought I'm just going to do freelance again, and started doing freelance. And an old friend from ILM named Jay Riddle, he was working at a company called Electronic Arts, EA Games,
Right.
and we're in the Bay Area together. And he says, hey, I need some storyboards for a James Bond game we're working on. I said, yeah, okay, let's talk about it. So I went over and started doing boards for them, and EA started giving me more and more work. And eventually 9/11 happened. And the same week that 9/11 happened, EA offered me a full-time job. And I thought, boy, that sounds really good. Ironically, ILM same week offered me to come back to Lucasfilm to work for them, to work on a Hulk movie.
Hmm.
And I thought, do I want to be driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, high profile target for terrorism, or do I want to drive 3 miles to Electronic Arts and basically do the same type of work? I said, I think I'll take the EA job. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 kids at the time too, so
Yeah, no,
that
those
made
are
it a
real
simple
things. Those are
decision.
considerations, just like it was in LA. When you left
Yeah.
LA, that was the same kind of thing. It was exploding, you know.
Yeah, it was a life decision, do I want to be there for my kids, be for them at dinner time and walk them to school? Or do I want to be, commuting an hour up to the Bay Area, up to north of the Golden Gate Bridge to work on a film that I probably wouldn't have cared for anyway. So,
Well, I would think that it gives you another opportunity to be curious and do things that you've never done, right? Because there seems to be this
yeah.
thematic, whether it's car designs or, Atari or, movies or Nike, you're stepping forward to try to challenge yourself. It seems that way.
Yeah, and I've always gravitated towards variety too, and that was the fun thing with ILM and even the video game companies I've worked for is that the games change really regularly. And you'll be working on a Western themed thing, or you'll be working on a sci-fi thing, or you'll be working on, a car thing, or the titles change. And I've always gravitated towards working on for people who are doing a variety of different things because I guess I get bored easily.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. Well, you may master the craft and then you go, I want something else.
well, it's very kind, but I think it's just I get a little bit impatient and I want to do something else. I'm
And
always
so,
looking for something else.
and so how was it different working at the game company?
Um, the process was the same again, but it's just the themes of the games were different. I was working on a Simpsons game. I was working on James Bond. I was working on The Godfather. I was working on
Mhm.
a motocross game. They're also drastically different. So you're always part of the fun of being a concept artist is before you really start creating images on paper or on the computer, you are finding reference images that hopefully speak to the tone of the film or the tone of the game. So it's a lot of looking through books and scanning photos out of books, or more regularly now, it's going on a Google image page and typing in, concept architecture, and oh, that building that looks cool. We'll put this in the front reference folder. So you try to build that reference folder of images that you think are going to speak to the tone or the story that you're working on. Show those to the director or head of the game and see if they respond, what they respond to. So then you can go back and be more focused on the artwork that you're going to be creating, inspired by all those reference images.
Hmm. So you do a portfolio collage of things that excite you, that you see, and you can kind of see a vision for. You take it to the director, they look at it, they pick what they see, and then you go and focus on those images
Exactly.
you've already selected and thought about anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
because if somebody says design me a building, immediately you have 1,000 questions. So
Right.
if they can't answer that, you have to give them some reference images. You kind of build a spectrum from a log cabin to, a Zaha Hadid high concept architectural building. Where do you want to land, in your story?
So does this job that you do and you've done your entire life completely change dramatically, just like it did for when they came up with the CGI with AI for you? There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, here it is. And you put in those same things that you're thinking about, and it brings it all up to the forefront. And are you needed? Can anybody do that?
Yeah.
Doubt it, but quite honestly, I doubt it very seriously.
Yeah. You're only as good now as your input, as your
Yeah.
prompt input.
Yes.
And so I guess they call it, a friend of mine at work here, he says they call it mid journey for a reason because it only gets you halfway. It'll spit out a design, but maybe it doesn't get you where you still are in your own head.
Hmm.
So you can take what they've begun with the AI image, and then you can modify it yourself to create it and turn it into your vision.
Yeah, that's how I would think it is, you know,
Yeah.
from whatever I've worked, my son's thrown up a couple things for writing and stuff. And I'm like, okay, there's like 3 words in there that I like, the
Mhm.
rest of the whole sentence and paragraphs really is not great or doesn't make sense. But there are 3 words that I had not thought of, and that spurs my brain to go,
Yeah,
okay, let's go in that direction. So I'm sure that's
exactly.
probably similar to you. Have you started to use that, tool at all?
I was playing around with it a lot last fall, and I found it to be a serious rabbit hole. You know, I would start thinking of prompts when I'm laying in bed, or if I'm at a restaurant, or if I'm driving and thinking, oh yeah, I got to remember that prompt. And I thought, I've got to stop. This is getting too addictive.
Well,
I,
it gives you something else that you can do now that maybe in a faster way and more information, which I could see you would like.
yeah, yeah, I like that aspect of it, but again, I don't know. It was just there were too many opportunities. And like I said, it's like I stay off of the internet a lot because there's so many different areas where you can just go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. You start off at A and you're at Z times 10 already. So,
And I would
um,
think it would be hard for you because you're so visual that everything clicks and triggers you to go, okay.
it is, but I'm kind of I'm really new at this painting for myself thing.
Right.
I only really started doing these paintings about, I don't know, 2 years ago.
And how did that happen? What brought you to go, okay, I've done all this stuff. Now I want to kind of create some things of my own.
Well, I had done some paintings when I was still really involved in the hot rod culture.
Hmm.
And it was less about painting the cars, but more about painting the people who I'd seen at the hot rod events.
Mm.
Because they were really living these period lifestyles, these 50s, 40s, rockabilly lifestyles. So I was doing a lot of paintings. I was selling a lot of paintings to them. I was selling a lot of prints, car shows, what have you. But then that whole scene was really trailing off. So I stopped painting for years. And then I picked up Ed Mill's book again. I bought it back in the 90s, and I picked it up again. I really started looking through it, and I just fell in love with his paintings all over again. And I was reading the story of his life, and I went, my gosh, I'm finding a lot of similarities in his likes and his path for how he got to do what he's doing now.
Like Art Center for one.
Art Center for one, he wanted to be a car designer. He loved General Motors specifically.
Yeah.
I studied car design. I went to General Motors. We had two older brothers. Both of them were artists. Our names kind of sounded the same. He
Yeah.
named his son Carson. My son's name is Carter. There are just little things like that. I went, I've got to write this man a letter. 2018, I wrote him a fan letter,
Yeah.
like 2, 3
You
pages
ever
long.
written a fan letter before in your life?
I had written fan letters to all the drag racers back in when I was at, 11, 12, 13 years old,
So like Youngblood, right?
like Youngblood and the other drivers. And they'd send stickers, they'd send t-shirts, they'd send photographs, autographed photographs,
Yeah.
which all this stuff I still have in big boxes. Anyway, so I write Ed this letter, and I didn't hear anything. And I thought, man, he's such an incredible artist. I'm sure he's incredibly busy all the time.
Right.
So I let it go and I let it go, but I kept thinking about it. I think I gotta, I've gotta, find his website and write to his gallery. So I write to, turned out to be Ken Richardson. And I said, I wrote Ed this letter a long time ago. I know he's super busy, but I really feel some urge to talk to him. And so he goes, well, I'll pass along your message to him, and if he can, he'll call you or he'll write back. So a lot of time goes by still, and I'm walking out to my car at EA one day for lunch, and the phone rings, and I look down and it says Ed Mel, and I go, oh my God, he's calling me. Oh no, what am I going to say to him? I figured, well, it's going to be like a 2-minute phone call. He's going to say, thanks for the letter. It's really nice. I enjoyed reading it. Thank you very much. Take care. Get on the phone. I'm on the phone with him for like 45 minutes. I go, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. It was so inspiring. So he inspired me to start painting, seeing his paintings again. And I was drawing these funny shapes. I'd get bored at meetings at work, and I started drawing these shapes. All I can say is that they were shapes. They were, I guess, nature inspired, but I was drawing these shapes, and they evolved and they evolved and they evolved, and they became a little more simplistic and a little more cubist and a little more modern. And I thought, I got to try painting one of these things. And the first time I tried a couple in gouache, and I kind of liked how they looked, but I really wanted a really crisper line. I thought maybe I should try them on the computer. So I tried them on the computer. I thought, yeah, that's pretty neat, but I want to do them. I want to do something a little bigger. So I bought some oil paints and bought some wood veneer. I just started painting, and I thought, hey, this is pretty good. When I finished one, I brought it out to the living room and I showed my wife, Wendy, and she goes, wow, that's pretty neat. So then I guess I shared them to Ed in 2019. And then he had a show. He had a show at his gallery in Phoenix in the fall of 2019. And before that, I went down to see him. I wanted to meet him in person. I'd heard he was having a show at his gallery. So I wanted to go down. Wendy and I flew down, met him in person, couldn't believe it. He signed my book. It was a great time. Amazingly, he said, hey, you should come down and see my gallery. And, Wendy and I were going to do some sightseeing in Arizona. So we go, okay, yeah, let's do that. So we went down to his gallery one day. He showed us around his gallery, spent a lot of time with us there. He goes, hey, tonight we're having some people over. You want to come over and hang out? I looked at Wendy and we go, yeah, we should go to his house. And you've been to his house. His house.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. Mind blowing.
Yeah, it's a really unique,
So I come back.
house.
Oh my gosh, it's so incredible. So we come back from the trip, and yeah, that inspired me to do these paintings, and showed them to him. And then he had the show later in 2019 and said, yeah, I'd like you to be part of this group show I'm having. So if you can send me 2 paintings, that'd be great. So Wendy said, why don't you just send them all? You've done 4 of them, just send them all down. I sent them all down. First day, I sold all 4 of them. So I went home all excited. I'm going to paint some more. So he really ignited, a spark in me.
And you're still working at the gaming company?
Yeah, I'm still working for a game company. We moved up to Bend, Oregon in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. And I've been working at Sony, the Bend studio here in Bend since then.
And so you're making art on your free time, basically, right?
Yeah.
You're still doing that, right?
Yeah.
And now you have a website, right? Give us the name of the website.
John Bell Studio.
And that's where the people can find and see your work, correct?
Yeah, the Instagram page has more of my personal paintings, and that's John Bell Studio. My website has more of the film and game and personal work, and that is johnbell.studio.
Okay. And so you're you've got a full-time job in Bend, but you also are painting. You're still painting, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That fire's there, right?
Oh yeah, it's still there. Yeah. And after meeting you and seeing Ed again in Santa Fe, it's definitely keeps the fire going.
Uh-huh. And so what's next for you? Do you know?
I don't know, I'll keep producing my paintings and see if, how they resonate with people. I've sold some, um, not as many as I'd hope, but it takes time. I'm being patient with them. I'm trying to build some momentum. I just keep throwing them up on social media. I keep trying to, introduce myself to different galleries in especially the Southwest and up into Colorado, Texas. And, like I said, some things have sold and I'll just keep doing it. I enjoy doing it. So, my wife asked me, so what are you going to do when you're retired? Because you're probably just a couple, 3 years away from retiring. I said, well, I'm sure I'm going to still be creating something. I've been doing these little sculpture reliefs and I've been painting, so I'm sure I'll just continue to do that, I guess.
Yeah, that's never going to stop.
I've been chipping away at a Western love story based in 1871. It's a very quirky story. It's like Rango, if you saw the movie Rango.
Yeah.
It's similar in tone to that. It's kind of quirky, unexpected ending. And so I'd done a bunch of line drawings for it a few years ago. And just recently I've started putting color to the drawings.
And so will you take a book like that and try to make it into a film and pitch it as a film or just as a book or
I think, yeah, it'll be a book, kind of like a, graphic novel.
Mhm.
It'll be probably like 30 pages, maybe at the most 20, 30 pages. So something very minimal. Because I'm not a real writer. I'm just making stuff up that I think would be kind of fun or funny.
Yeah,
And
but when you pitch a show, I mean, that's all you need anyway, right? I mean, if you're going to
yeah,
go, I mean, to pitch a movie or a series or whatever, I mean, they don't want a book. They want,
yeah,
give me the arc, right? And what's
yeah,
the next season if you're going to do it that way, right?
exactly.
Huh.
So
So you
anyway,
got, so you got the book cooking, the graphic novel, you're making your art, and you're still working full time. And is it with Sony?
it's with Sony, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what are you
And
doing there? What is your,
at
what's your
Sony,
title?
my title is senior concept artist,
Yes.
and so um, I design along with five other concept artists for the studio. We design the things that you actually will see in the game, the environments, the characters, the weapons, the vehicles, all the props.
Hmm.
That all comes from the concept artists. So that's what we do.
So I think a lot of people that hear this podcast, you're going to find people that are very interested in what you do as a concept artist. And my question to you, is this still a viable, career for people coming in? And if so, how do they become a concept artist?
Yeah, well, hearing my trajectory, it's not the normal trajectory to become a concept artist, starting out as a car designer and doing a lot of things in between. Um, yeah, it's still going to be viable because, directors and creative directors are still going to be creating stories, and the stories, if they're to be realized as a visual product, are going to need concept artists to help them visualize their stories. So,
Seems like a very small club.
you know what? It was very small when I started. There was maybe 10 or 20 people who did it in the
Hmm.
entire world at that time. And now there's conceptart.org and there's all these different concept art websites where there are literally tens of thousands of people who want to do concept art for films and games. And there just aren't that many films and games being produced, well, especially in films now because of the strike going on. But there might be 100 games or a couple hundred films a year that come out that need art support, concept art support. So, you do the math, there's tens of thousands of people who want to do it, but there's only so many jobs going around.
Right. And I can imagine that the jobs that are going around, they immediately go, who's been doing it the longest and who has the experience? That's where they're going to fall to. I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
how do they
true.
break into this business, or do they? Or they do it just like you do, just one step at a time and just grind away.
Yeah, I think you just have to keep putting yourself out there, be
Yeah.
prepared for a lot of no's. I still get a lot of no's when I throw my name out to people. They go, yeah, it's good, but no thanks. And so you just have to have a thick skin, but just keep putting yourself out there. And I tell my kids that all the time. I say, the worst they're going to do is say no. It's just, what are you going to do? You got to keep going. If it's your passion, if you really believe in yourself and what you're creating, then it's going to hit somebody at some point. I mean, I just got a call from a major animation studio last week, and they're interested in talking to me about an upcoming project. And I've never done work for their studio, and I haven't worked on an animated feature in 12 years.
Hmm.
But they saw something, somebody like land on a website or something, and they said, "Oh yeah, I remember him."
Yeah. John Bell, he's been around for a long time.
Yeah, maybe get some. Maybe he's still got some gas in the tank.
Yeah. Well, is there anything we haven't touched on that you would like to bring out or talk about?
Oh gosh, we really covered a lot more than I expected.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a real pleasure. I mean, you've also had a career that's kind of taken this
Not like
course.
that career. Mm-mm.
No,
No, not like yours. Mine's more linear.
I don't know. From being doing sports medicine to writing books, and you're doing photography. Some of those photographs on your website are fantastic.
Yeah. Oh,
They're
yeah. I've been doing a lot of more photography just for me. You know,
Yeah,
I've probably taken 10,000 photos in the last few years, but I don't put any of them out there. I just like keeping them for me. Maybe just like you're writing your graphic novel and,
yeah,
but your painting is much more serious. I mean, I can feel that that's a real viable thing that you would like to continue to do and
yeah,
people know about.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for
If that
sure.
took off, does it change what you do?
If it took off,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I asked Ed last year on a phone call. I said, "Hey Ed, did you ever imagine that your career would become as it's become?" And he said, "Yeah, I did imagine it. I don't know if it would ever really happen, but yeah, I could imagine it."
Mm,
So I keep that in mind. I think, yeah, okay, I can imagine I could be doing art, my own art full time, you
yeah,
know,
I can imagine it too.
and service a lot of different people and different galleries.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to use
No,
Ed's energy,
right.
to propel
Yeah.
me.
No, he's a unique human being. There's no
Oh
doubt
my
about it.
gosh,
And
so
very
generous
influential. Yeah. And humble. He's a
and
humble guy.
humble.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
My friend, you are very humble too. I mean, if you look at your resume and all the things you've worked on, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, believe it or not, John. I know you probably wouldn't believe it. They go, oh, it's John Bell. He worked on all these things. Oh my God, I want to call John Bell. Yeah, I bet so. I have to believe that. Yeah, you've
yeah,
just done so
it,
much.
it's the closest that I come to that is I do have people who write me occasionally about Jurassic Park or Back to the Future 2 and ask me questions about that, or they want to show their modified Ford Explorer that they've painted to
Right,
look just like the one in the film. And
right.
it's it's pretty nice to know that the storytelling had that impact on people literally 30 to 35 years ago.
Oh yeah, Still does. I'm telling you,
It's
Jennifer Tafoya did a pot of a dinosaur, I'm sure was inspired somewhat. And I've got to ask her now by Jurassic Park that just won Best of Show. I mean, those things still resonate.
yeah. It's funny. I will tell you one more short story. Um, my dad is a painter. He's painted. After he left the music industry and career in the music business in New York City, he took up painting on his own. And for 40 years, he was a painter. So when I was working on Jurassic Park, he started doing these paintings of dinosaurs in kind of a folk, not folk art, but a very kind of primitive-esque type way. His paintings are really intricate and very detailed, very opposite of what I do. Anyhow, he'd done a painting of a dinosaur, and he had a gallery in New York City, and they hung a couple of his paintings up in there. Turns out my wife is working for Spielberg's archive in Los Angeles. She calls me one day and she goes, "Hey, John, guess what I'm looking at? I'm looking at one of your dad's paintings of a dinosaur in Spielberg's archive." Evidently, a friend of Spielberg's bought this dinosaur painting, gave it to Spielberg as a gift. It ends up in Spielberg's archive. So my dad's work is in Spielberg's archive.
Yeah, there you go. There's a route. Mhm.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah, not that crazy, actually. Some weird way. Yeah, there's
The
some.
universe is weird.
Yeah, the universe is it's hard to understand the universe, but
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me. I don't know why. It just doesn't surprise me. I bet there's a lot more of those little clicks and ticks around in your life than you know about. You know?
Yeah. There's a lot of just being, it's so funny, just being in the right place at the right time, you
And then
know.
taking advantage of those situations.
Yeah. And having other people believe in you, like
Yeah,
Nilo, like Rick,
yeah. Like Ed.
like Ed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, those. Yeah, embrace those moments
I
because they can
know. Because I
lead you.
think I mentioned at dinner, I said, I can't believe that, Ed invites me to these dinners. And you turned to me and you said, he doesn't do it with a lot of people.
No, he doesn't. No. Yeah, he has a click with you, as I do. Yeah, I get
Feel,
it. Yeah.
feel very
Yeah,
fortunate.
he's very good at painting. He's also very good at evaluating individuals, and when he likes you, he really likes you.
Yeah.
So that's
We had a lot of fun. It's been really a pleasure, a real pleasure to meet you and to have you invite me to be on one of the
oh yeah.
podcasts.
Oh
It's
no, this is
incredible.
fantastic. Well, you also tell a story that no one I've ever had on. I've had a lot of illustrators, but this is a different kind of lifestyle that you've done, and a different thing that, quite honestly, I didn't even know existed, until you told me about it. It's like I didn't know this was a profession. And I mean, other people go, yeah, of course it is. But for me, it's not something that I run across every day. If I were in LA, it would be, yeah, of course. But so I think people will find it very interesting. And I encourage people who listen to or watch this podcast, make sure you go to John's website, go to his Instagram, and check it out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I enjoy really. I've watched the two Ed Mel ones that you've done, and I just love them. Just love them.
Yeah.
You bring across, you're very casual and very
Yeah.
personable, and you really engage the subject that you're talking to in a really nice, easygoing way. I appreciate it.
Well, I just enjoy listening to these stories, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of what you do. You listen to the story that the director and people are telling you, and then you take it and you put it out there. And I'm just, a fly on the wall going, oh, that's interesting. Just as interesting to me, quite frankly, and it will be interesting to other people. So, John,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I hope that I get to go out and see you sometime in Bend. It's one of my favorite cities. So,
Yeah. And I want to come down to Tucson.
yeah, or yeah, don't forget we have our show coming up for Ed, and I should know the date immediately off the top of my head, but I don't. But it's coming up. It's on my website. But yeah, you'll have to come down for the or
That'd
one.
be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll go do dinner again.
Oh my gosh, Mark.
Yeah, put it on your schedule. Go on the web. You can see what day it
Yeah,
is.
will do.
Remember it off the top of my head. All right, John. Thank you again for taking the time.
Take care. Say hi to your family for me
I
too.
will. All right. Talk soon. Thanks.